So
Great to have you here.
before I get started, I'm going to tell you just a little bit about me, and that's because many of you have probably heard me speak before, but just in case, I want to make sure you know who I am and why do I have authority to speak on this matter. So we are a full-service real estate investment firm. We specialize in property management and investment property sales and acquisitions. We are not a mom and pop shop. We have a team of 27, and we grow pretty much every month. All the things that I'm talking about, you're going to hear me talk a lot about what I do and what we do. And I think that that is one of the things that is so important to why we do business the way we do. All these ways that we see people get taken advantage of are the things that I've had clients come to me from that position. I've had situations like what Kathy mentioned in Cleveland. We've had people come to us where someone's gotten sick or someone's died or where someone's taken off with their money in the escrow account, all sorts of things. And it's really important that you align yourself with someone that you can trust, someone who's knowledgeable, and someone who, if God forbid they get sick or they die, that the company continues. And so there are a lot of people who like mom and pop operations. And, you know, if that's the way that you want to go, that's great. And certainly I would not be one to deter you from that. What I'm going to do is tell you what you should be looking for and what I feel are the most important pieces when you have an investment property that's being managed. Because whether you're holding that home for 2 years or 20 years, at some point in time, you're either going to have to re-rent it or sell it. And if it's not being properly managed, you're not going to be able to do that, or you're going to have significant costs to be able to do that. So, of course, we're A+ rated and accredited with the Better Business Bureau, A-rated on Angie's List. We have hundreds and hundreds of clients. We are licensed and insured in Texas. And kind of moving forward from there, let's get started talking about what you need to be looking out for.
Well, right there, you just mentioned 3 things that people can look for. You can look up Better Business Bureau. You can always just Google the business name and find out if people hate them. And, you know, if tenants hate that. You know, if the tenants hate their property manager, that's not a good sign. And then the licensed insured. You know, this is not... How do you suggest people look up to verify that a company is licensed and insured?
Well, so, you know, that's actually one of the things I'm going to talk about here. And I can really only speak to Texas, so a lot of these things are going to be generalities. But in general, a lot of companies are not insured. And in Texas, it's actually not required. So I could do business without insurance. That's a pretty significant concern because even the best company can make a mistake. And if that company has no insurance, then you've got a problem. Now, one thing that is beneficial in Texas is that there's something called the Recovery Fund, and it's actually maintained by the licensing entity. And if there's some type of egregious claim and there's no insurance in place, or often for unlicensed companies, people can claim into that recovery fund. And so one of the questions a lot of people ask me is, well, I've been taken advantage of, I'm missing money, what do I do? And of course, you can always contact an attorney, but one of the big things I tell people to do is if they're a realtor, contact the Realtor Association, or if they're licensed, contact the state licensing entity, because most states do require a license for almost all property management activity. And almost all states have recovery funds. There's a couple loopholes to having a license. If you own the building and you self-manage or you have an employee who manages, then no, they don't have to be licensed in a lot of cases. Apartment complexes, this is how they have leasing agents that aren't licensed. But if you are not an owner in the property or an employee of the owner, property management is not an employment situation. I'm an independent contractor on my client's behalf. So if you hire someone to manage your house, you hire a friend to manage your house, they must be licensed, especially in Texas. And some of those laws have recently changed, and a lot of companies have not kept with the times. And I do run into companies that don't hold active licenses, and it's something that it's a scary situation because if they're not licensed, it means they don't know the new laws, they don't know what they need to be doing. And that can be a real concern and real devastating blow to your investment.
Okay, so property
you kind of hit my
management.
first point here.
All right. Sorry to jump the gun there.
I know, exactly. So obviously my recommendation is you always use someone licensed. I think that using a friend or using just a colleague is a very dangerous recipe for disaster. It's also very tricky if something goes wrong, and it's very tricky for them to know if something goes wrong, not on their mistake, but what the tenant does, how to handle it. And so you really want someone, it should not be a hobby. One thing that we saw when the market dropped, especially here, is the agents that had been doing just a few deals, barely enough to get by, when those deals stopped, they all became, quote, property managers. And so they held themselves out as such. They were doing it without the knowledge of the broker. The state requires the broker be involved in everything. So if you've got this individual agent who's either quoting you a really good price or they're having you send money to them directly or to their bank account, that's a red flag. The broker has to be involved. The bank account has to be through the broker. And that's a thing a lot of people don't realize. And one of the biggest complaints that I see when people switch management to us from another firm is that either an agent was managing improperly and money is missing, or they did a poor job. And so I would say that at least 6 or 7 times a year I have a client who comes to me with a $10,000 to $15,000 deficit from another manager. And that's a pretty scary situation to be in, because even if that money is missing, you still have to account for deposits and things to the tenants. And so that can get very ugly very quickly. I already talked about how insurance is not required in most cases. There are a few loopholes to that. If the majority owner in a company does not hold a real estate license, then some states are going to require them carry insurance. But it's an important question to ask. Are you insured? Are you licensed? And you can verify that by a very quick Google search of whatever the licensing entity is. And another thing about that is most of the state's licensing entities will actually let you search disciplinary history. And so when you view the license on Texas's website, you can actually see if they've ever had a complaint filed against them with the licensing entity. And that's a real good indication of the type of person that you're looking at. Another thing, I mentioned that I'm not a big fan of mom and pop shops. That's true. Experience level does matter. Size can be a good indicator. There are companies that have 50 properties, 100 properties, 200 properties. They may be very good at what they do. But if you're looking for the best of the best, you need someone who has encountered pretty much anything that can come up, whether it's a drug house, whether it's a tenant that has destroyed a property and now has filed bankruptcy and you have to get a lift stay on that bankruptcy to evict them. Whatever the situation may be, it's important to have someone who's experienced. And one of the things that's very interesting is property managers will say that they manage a certain type of property, but they may not have any. And so it's important you ask. If you're bringing a 15-unit apartment complex, you need to ask them, do you have any units this size? If so, where? Or if you have a duplex, do you have any duplexes in this area? That's one of the most important questions I think to ask, because property management companies often are very starved for business. And so they may take a property that doesn't fit their model. They may take a property that's further out from their comfort zone. And, I've got a team of 27. If I need to send someone an extra 20 miles, I can do that. Your mom and pop shop may not be able to do that. And so it's important you ask those questions so that you accurately know what you're getting into.
Very good. So back to the insurance piece of it, you could just, would you think it would be normal for a customer to say, hey, I just want to see proof of insurance?
I've never had someone ask me for proof of insurance, but I could certainly see that somebody could. A lot of the state licensing entities actually require you provide proof to the state, or it's posted on the state, just like with a lot of contractors. And so that's certainly one avenue that you can do. But typically, if you're dealing with a reputable company and you ask them for license and insurance information, they'll be able to provide you a policy number or a carrier.
Okay, good. All right. Importance of accreditation. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, and so I'm going to talk a little bit more about this when we talk about leasing, but this is a good example of what we carry. And you'll see there's a lot of places that we are members of, and the importance of that is a few things. First is going to be they have their own code of ethics. So as strict as the state may be on licensing requirements and things of that nature, the Association of Realtors is even worse. And this is actually the board that my husband and co-owner serves on, hearing the complaints against other realtors. And they have their own tribunals that do this. It's a very important piece of our business, because things that are ethical but perhaps versus moral, that's where your license versus this accreditation is going to come into play. So things that may be legal but are immoral with the state law is going to be something that the Realtor Association is probably going to consider against their rules. And so it's very important that you work with realtors. And I'm going to talk more about why in a little bit, but I want to make sure everyone hears that clearly. You should be working with realtors. It's very important. And one thing that makes it probably the most important piece of all of this is without being a realtor, they do not have MLS access. And that's something that a lot of people do not realize. A real estate agent means you're licensed with the state, and a realtor means you belong to the Association of Realtors, and that is what controls the MLS. So if your agent is not a realtor, if your manager is not a realtor, they cannot market your home on the MLS, and that is huge. In my company, the majority of my agents carry very high designations as well, ABR, GRI, ePro, all these different certifications that we send our people for, and we actually do monthly training in our office for MCE credit for our staff. And so that's one of the things that we do to make sure our team is trained, but that's definitely something that you want to ask the people you're working with too. Do you have licensees working for you? Do you train them? Or are they people that, you know, come in with no experience and they just work like assistants? And so that's an important piece of this too.
Great. Anything else on this page? Are we good?
No, I think we're good.
Okay, do you want to just tell us a little bit about some of the, you know, the guidelines that NARPM has that, you know, if your property manager is not a member, they might not be living up to those standards?
NARPM is, I don't find it as important as a realtor association. The realtor association is really the one that you want to deal with because they're the ones that can assign them to classes and they're the ones that can revoke their MLS. NARPM is good and it's great for education, but most property managers will subscribe to it just to put it up there. The Realtor Association is going to be the one who handles the orientations, and they're going to be the ones that teach a lot of the continuing education classes. They're the ones that are going to be making sure that, you know, you're not violating MLS listing rules and that you're marketing fairly and all those types of things. And so a lot of the rules that we're talking about here are fairness and treating others fairly. And as a landlord, you wouldn't think that would affect you very much, but think about it this way. If someone lists a property and says this is a great home for a young couple, you are not appealing to the majority of the people who are looking for a rental property. Or if you list a property that says this is a great young family with kids neighborhood, who's not going to want to look at that property now? But those types of things are against the rules in these listings. And so that's one of the things. It's called MLS Checker, and especially North Texas MLS Netris. They're at the forefront of this technology. And so the Realtor Association is also going to be making sure that your agents are marketing properly and not opening you up to liability. Because if that agent lists that property where, you know, God forbid they say that they're not going to take someone who's color purple, who is that going to come back on? Is that just going to come back on the agent, or is that going to come back on you as an owner? Or if they say that they don't want more than 3 children in the household, well, of course, that's not allowed by law. And so these are the types of things that is so important with the Realtor Association. The other thing it does is it puts you in mediation. And so if you have a dispute between one realtor and another, or you've got a dispute when you're selling the property, they're going to go to mediation first. And that's a really important step because none of us want to have to involve attorneys unless we have to. And so I think that more than anything, they're making sure that everyone is being treated fairly, including the client and the owner.
Very good. Let me just check and see if there are questions. Okay, people are saying, how do I contact her? We're going to give all that information at the end. You know, our teams are so very, very overwhelmed by the amount of investors that we have at Real Wealth Network, so we always like to have everybody come to us first so we can answer the most basic questions and then refer over to our different teams. So we would just want to know a little bit more about you and what you're trying to achieve so that we can answer the questions first. So we'll get that information to you. Also, I want to let you know that we're going to talk about this a little bit more in a bit, but we have just finalized our tour to Dallas, and we're very, very excited, so I'll announce it quickly. February 28th will be our Dallas tour day. On the Friday evening before, on the 27th of February, we're going to have a little cocktail party for those who can arrive early. The 28th, we're going to meet at a meeting room in the morning. I will be giving a talk about you know, our experience with Dallas and why we like the area and basic overview of strategy. And then we'll have our local Dallas CPA come in and talk about the tax benefits. And that'll be just a half an hour, and then Leah will come in. We'll jump on a bus and go look at all of these properties in the you know, that she's been able to get exclusive listings for, and that right now are just for us, just being shown to Real Wealth Network members, and will be held till that date. So we're very excited. The 28th, and then that evening we'll have a cocktail party and dinner with the title company and the lenders, and you get to ask all kinds of questions of them. And then Sunday will be one-on-ones, right? What did I leave out there, Leah?
I think you covered just about all of it. On Sunday, we'll have one-on-ones, individual strategy sessions, and you'll be able to meet with us and go through what you're looking for and what your goals are, and we'll help guide you to where you need to go.
Perfect. Okay, so if you're interested in that, just reach out to us, info@realwealthnetwork.com. We don't have it up on our website yet, but the details will be under our tour page. If you go to right by the events area, there'll also be a section on tours, and all those details will be up shortly, but we just finalized it yesterday.